Officers of the law who drive unmarked cars, what is your best "are you freaking kidding me" moment that you witnessed because they didn't realize you were watching? Story 1. Obligatory not me, but my dad. He was a detective in an unmarked car, coming back from a hearing. He was not in his jurisdiction and going 35 to 40 in a 35. There was a woman behind him riding his butt, which he largely ignored because he wasn't going painfully slow. In fact, a bit over. She starts beeping her horn and waving her arms, swerving side to side like she was trying to find a way to zoom around him. He's also approaching the township line, putting him within his jurisdiction. Literally 5 seconds after he crosses the township line, the woman speeds around him. Funny enough, at this township line, the speed limit also drops from 35 to 25. He clocks her going 55. Puts on his removable police light, and pulls her over. Now, this is where things get funky. His car has a dash cam and records everything. This will be important soon. As he walks up to her window, she's visibly shaking in anger. He shows her his badge, explains who he is, as he's in suit and tie, not standard police uniform, and tells her he clocked her at 55 in a 25. He then asks her for her license and registration, and she responds by screaming "Roar!" out the window as loud as she can. He then asks if she would be more comfortable if he called a uniformed on-duty patrolman. She suddenly calms down and says it's fine. I don't remember the timeline, as I was younger, but he ends up being taken to court for assaults. This woman was claiming to be my dad, reached in her window, grabbed her breast, and said he wouldn't write her a ticket if she was willing to play ball. My dad is mildly stressed, but has reviewed the dash cam, full audio, and good quality video with his appointed lawyer, which clearly shows none of that ever happened, and my father never even approached putting his hand inside her car. Judge hears the woman's testimony and asks if she has told the truth. She claims she has. At that point, they bring out the TV and play the dash cam. Judge informs her she should ask for leniency, and maybe she will receive a break from false charges. From my understanding, in order to avoid jail time, she agreed to a very long probation period and community service. One of my favorites is how stupid you can be moments, and also a good lesson to not be a butthole in general. What a stupid woman. I hate when people lie about assault like that and harassment, taking away from the real victims. Story 2. I actually work probation. We drive gray, slick-top Chargers with blue lights. We monitor people that are on GPS monitoring for the state. Occasionally, these monitors go dead. They need servicing. Sometimes an offender says, "Screw it," cuts the unit off, and goes trolling for a station wagon full of nuns or something. Well, anyway, I'm in this gray Charger with blue lights because it's my week to do the GPS monitoring thing. In my state, probation officers have the same arrest powers as state troopers, DNR officers, or normal police, only we have statewide jurisdiction. So I came across a disabled vehicle with a big Ford behind it. There's lots of traffic, and this Ford is trying to get around the disabled car. So I'm like, man, this dude is never getting around this car. So I turn on my blue lights, stop traffic so he can get around safely. So I'm sitting there waving the guy through when this Indian fellow comes up on my passenger side window and he says, "Officer, that guy in the truck just hit that car. He was going seriously fast, weaving all over the place. Then he hit that car right there. I think he's drunk." At this point, I'm like waiting for that guy, and I point to the guy I'm letting out, and he's like, "That's him." So I'm like, God dang it. I already have my lights on, so I hit the siren, tone change, and pull him over. Long story short, I end up kicking the crap out of him, cuffing him, and waiting for the local Smokies to show up and transport him to jail because I don't have a caged car. Turns out he was driving down the street drinking out of a vodka bottle and orange juice bottle, making little mouth-sized screwdrivers with his dang 4-year-old in the car. The upshot for the little 4-year-old was that one of the responding officers that showed up had a thick Liverpool accent. The little girl legit thought that she was speaking to the cop Mary Poppins. Super cute. You know you're an alcoholic when you mix your drinks inside your mouth. Story 3. Okay, I am not a cop. The car was not unmarked. That's why this is so freaking kidding me. Scene: bridge over the interstate. The left lane enters the interstate, middle and right lane go on down the road. Cop sitting in the right lane with lights on, as he sometimes does. Nearly the entire bridge is a solid white line for that left turn lane to prevent people trying to cut in at the last moment. For people who don't realize and have missed the turn, there's a very easy U-turn area right past the bridge. Some prick, who I would have sworn was blind, if not for the fact he was driving a car, was at the end of that long wait for the left turn. He shoots into the middle lane, cutting me off, drives the length of the bridge, and pulls up to the light in the middle lane and stops. Puts on his left turn signal. I'm stuck behind him as he waits for the entire light. No one is letting this dumb frick in. This isn't that kind of city, and he clearly just didn't want to wait his turn. Not to mention the whole solid white line and easy U-turn area after the light. He could have just gone past the light and pulled a U-turn. There is a designated space for it, but no spree bob, not good enough for him. So I'm sitting there, having waited the entire length of the green light for this prick. Oh, and the reason the line wasn't moving is the left arrow had gone red 20 seconds before he pulled his Kong baggery. Looking between the now yellow light and the cop who is staring at this guy, the light turns red. The guy then proceeds to very slowly pull out and turn left from the middle lane, going through the red light. The look of utter incredulity on the cop's face as he turned on the siren and immediately pulled him over will be with me forever. Still ticked off he made me miss the light, though. The justice boner was worth it, though. Story 4. Sitting at a stop sign in front of a school when a lady speeds through said stop sign doing 50 in a 15. I pull her over and give my usual line. Is there perhaps a medical or other legally justifiable reason you ran that stop sign in front of a school doing 50 miles per hour? She says, I'm having a miscarriage. No, she wasn't, but so I tell that she's in luck. I'm a trained medic, and I'll get an ambulance. As the ambulance is en route, the dispatcher tells me the ambulance crew wants to know if she's bleeding. She heard this on my radio, and I told my dispatcher, stand by. It's hot, and we're in Texas. She's wearing very short shorts. So I stick my head all the way in her car, look down at her crotch, then back at her and say, I guess not, huh? Still waiting for that ambulance, and she grabs her cell phone and calls her husband. They're talking, and she hands me the phone and says, it's my husband. Can you tell him why I'm going to be late? Late? Thought it was a miscarriage. So I grab the phone and only tell the guy, your wife is having a miscarriage. I'm so sorry for your loss. And immediately hang up the phone. The look on her face was priceless. Good times. She was so angry. I can't imagine how that conversation went when she got whatever it was she was going to. Plus the ticket for speeding and the stop sign and the ambulance bill, about $1,500 total. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Story 5. I was a detective off duty with my family when a jackbutt started following me way too close. I sped up and he did too. He pulled up next to me and he's driving a Crown Vic with a full police lights package and the words test vehicle on the door. He's clearly upset, turns on the lights and motions for me to slow down. He picked up a radio mic and looked like he was talking into it. I was inside of my own jurisdiction by now and called dispatch to see if they knew who this dude was. Nobody knows. Meanwhile, the test vehicle turns off the road behind me to a shopping center. My wife sighs heavily as I turn around and spot him getting out of the car, wearing a sweet pair of cargo shorts. I calmly took down the tag and arrived early for work the next day because my normal caseload was going to take a break for Mr. Test Vehicle. Found out he was not a police officer, but a salesman for police vehicle lights. Stroked out a warrant for impersonating a police officer and locked him up the same day. When I went over to the jail to talk to him, he told me that he gets angry when people speed around him when he's driving that car. He wasn't the pervert cop impersonator type, so he got a slap on the wrist, but his employer was ticked off when I told him. Story 6. I am not an officer, however, this is too perfect not to tell. Mind you, I was not speeding. I accelerated quickly and got in front of the SUV behind me, who proceeded to tailgate me. He was driving aggressively, and I thought the road was raging, so I got over again and sped around a car in front of me and got over again. I made my turn, and the guy was on my tail again. Suddenly, he lights me over, and my stomach drops. I pull over, and a plainclothes officer gets out and approaches. He says, "Sir, why were you driving like that? I'm not a traffic officer, but your erratic driving gave me no choice but to pull you." I shrugged my shoulders and responded, "You were tailgating me and looked angry. I thought you were raging and tried to get some distance from you." He responded, "That's fair," and walked back to his car and drove off. I did this once, though I technically did speed and got a ticket for it. Some SUV was riding me pretty hard, so I sped up to allow him to go around me. Mind you, he was really on my butt. Lit me up and gave me a ticket for it. I managed to get it thrown out in court because I included the prior 8 hours of recording on my dashcam showing my safe driving and not speeding once. Story 7. Not a cop, but I want to tell the story about what happened to my son when he was about 16. He and some friends had been hanging out at Dairy Queen. They were leaving DQ in his friend's car to go to one of their houses. They had encountered some other teenagers who were taunting them and generally being buttholes. My son was in the back seat of the car, and 2 of his friends were up front. A dark-colored sedan pulled up next to them at a stoplight. Kid driving says to the front seat passenger, "It's those buttholes again. Do something." Front seat passenger grabs a shoe and chucks it at the car's windshield. Well, guess who was actually driving that car? I got a friendly call from the PD to come pick up my kid, along with an assurance that he hadn't done anything wrong, but had really, really stupid friends. The cop made some kind of quip, as I was picking him up, about Grand Theft Auto Skinny Jeans Edition. Story 8. Not a cop, but one of my friends was doing an undercover stakeout at night in an unmarked car in a bad part of town. This wasn't just an unmarked Crown Vic, but a seized vehicle with heavy illegal tint, think like a Ricer-mobile. While he's there looking for a person of interest in a homicide, this guy walks by a few times, checking out the car and just looking fishy as frick. He comes back, stops by the car, tries the door, then pulls out a lockout tool and tries to unlock the car. The whole time, my buddy is trying to keep his crap together as this guy is trying to jack a car with a cop in it. He draws his pistol, cracks the window, and flashes his gun. The guy drops his tool and just starts freaking running down the street. He radioed in a description of the guy, didn't want to blow the stakeout with an arrest, and a uniformed unit picked him up 2 blocks away. Guy ended up being involved in an auto theft ring and brought them all down in exchange for a deal. He had one of the biggest busts of his career just walk up and try to break into his car. Story 9. From the other side of the story, I was driving along and this jerk behind me is riding my butt, so I speed up a little. Then he's trying to pass me, and since he was being a jerk, I speed up or slow down accordingly to not give him a chance to pass me. Finally, the lights come on. It's a cop. He asked me why I was going so fast, and I told him because he was riding my tail. He asked me why I would do that in front of a cop, and I said, "You're in an unmarked car." Luckily, he was just north of town and out of his jurisdiction, so he let me go. He's now the chief of police in that town. I have a similar story about a cop aggressively passing me and immediately turning right onto a side street in an unmarked cruiser. I nearly hit him due to him cutting me off and immediately slowing down and had to swerve into the left lane as not to. The cop in plain clothes actually had the nerve to turn around and pull me over asking why I was tailgating. Story 10. Not a cop, but still a good story. I was driving home from work on a 4-lane road, in the left lane coming up to a red light. Naturally, I came to a complete stop. At the lights, I noticed that there's a late model Impala in the right lane with his window down. Then, out of nowhere, an older Buick passed me on the left, crossing into the oncoming traffic and through a red light. In complete dismay of what had just happened, I looked at the guy next to me, who was already staring at me with the same stunned look on his face, so I said to the guy, "Where's a cop when you need one?" The guy in the Impala said to me, "Right here." He then threw on his lights and sped after the Buick. Once the light turned green, I drove up the road about 20 feet to see the undercover officer had pulled over the Buick. I gave him a honk of my horn, and he threw some finger guns at me. Story 11. I was driving from Indianapolis to Bloomington one day to visit a friend on the IU campus. I was going around 70 or so, running late, and I passed a cop in an unmarked Mustang on the side of the road. He pulled out, and I got ready to pull over. He got behind me, and just as he lit me up, a lady in a red convertible came flying past both of us. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw a completely stunned look on his face, as if he was asking himself, did this car really just blow by both of us? It took him a couple of seconds to recover, but then he pulled up beside me, pointed at me while laughing, and took off after the woman. I passed them as she was getting stopped and tooted the horn twice in thanks to her. Oh yeah, you can never drive too fast on 37, especially around Martinsville. You'll get lit up by the cops. Story 12. Family member's story. A detective who drives an unmarked car, a poop box actually to really blend, has seen deals, crimes in progress, but this stands out best. My cousin is a lousy driver by nature. One particular night he was being tailgated, high-beamed, etc. by an unhappy motorist behind him. He pulled into a gas station to let Ben pass, but the unsuspecting jerk followed him. "You got a problem, buddy?" he yelled to my cousin in a thick accent. My cousin gets out and the punk looks nervous while the detective replies, "Nope, but it looks like you do now," and flashes his badge. Arrest for driving a car with revoked registration, driving without a license, possession of drug paraphernalia, along with citations for his actions before the confrontation. Just let it go when driving. Always baffles me that when you're already driving without a valid license and drugs in your car, that you would go out and behave like a moron too. Story 13. Obligatory, I am not the officer, but I was driving on a 50-mile-per-hour limit dual carriageway, and a nice fellow with a Horsebox attached to his pickup decided that 0.2 inches behind my car on the inside lane was a nice amount of stopping distance for himself. Then he decided I wasn't having enough fun with just music, so proceeded to flash his lights. Repeatedly. Rave time. A turnoff approaches, so horsey McF-head takes it, then decides to cut across back onto the motorway in front of me, across the chevrons, forcing me to swerve into the outside lane lest my car be ridden off by his clearly occupied Horsebox. Then it happens. The angelic humming of a siren. The majestic flashing blue lights of karma. Unmarked police car flies over from a little while behind me, chasing the now speeding probable horse sucker. I passed them about 5 minutes later and tooted my woefully inadequate horn. Because I could. Story 14. Second police job was as a deputy sheriff, and I'm sitting there with my partner off a highway exit at a scenic overlook, eating some lunch and listening on the radio to CHP, trying to corner two motorcycles who are flying around the highway like idiots. No air support is available, so they terminate pursuit for safety. About 10 minutes later, as I'm polishing off my fourth taco, two bikes matching the description, and without any visible plates, exit the highway and pull into the same overlook. They take their helmets off, listen for a few minutes, kill the bikes, and then the one walks over to start peeing behind a tree. We made CHP transport them since that guy peed all over himself when we hit the siren. We were in an unmarked Subaru at the time. Oh man, that got a real laugh out loud out of me. Well done. Story 15. Not an officer, but every day after high school, 4 of us took the same 3-mile stretch of highway home. We frequently raced each other to the last exit, and the highway was usually pretty empty. One day I drove with my buddy, and he pulled up next to this blacked-out Ford Taurus and looked over going about 80 miles per hour. All of a sudden, a mass state trooper rolls down his passenger window to look at us, blares his sirens, throws all of his lights on, and starts ripping down the highway. He either got something important to do or was bored and wanted to mess with some kids, but we definitely chilled on the racing after that. Sounds like he sized you guys up and decided that's probably all it would take to keep you from acting like idiots in the future. Story 16. Retired sheriff's deputy here. Was not working, but in plain clothes with my young children in tow. We were at a local street carnival in my jurisdiction when I watched carnies do a hand-to-hand transaction of some type of narcotic. I contacted the officers on duty at the carnival, and the deputy prosecutor happened to be there as well. She asked me if I would be willing to do a purchase from one of the carnival workers. I had never worked undercover and didn't really know anything about narcotics or the street lingo. I was able to buy drugs and have an arrest effected almost immediately. "Hey, I know you're an off-duty cop and your kids are here, but we'd appreciate it if you'd set a good example for your kids and go buy drugs off that carny. Solid undercover work, sir. Story 17. I was on duty one day driving, not in an unmarked car, but a clearly marked car. It was an hour before I was to go home, so I had already mentally checked out pretty much. Anyway, I'm driving down a road, and this car zooms past this stop sign in front of me, causing me to slam on my brakes and slam on the horn, literally close to hitting him. It's funny because I exclaimed out loud to myself in the car, "Mother sucker! I wish there was a squad car near your butthole." Then I proceeded to remember I was that squad car, turned around 15 seconds later, and pulled him over. Yeah, had a little justice renob that day. Getting pulled over is scary enough, but a cop walking up to question me with a renob would be terrifying. Story 18. Not a cop. In college, my buddies and I lived in an especially affordable neighborhood. We all went to the bar one night, but soon received a call that there was a break-in. Got home, and the cop told us he and his partner were driving by our house in an unmarked car when they saw an individual struggling to carry digital cameras, a t-shirt full of spare change, and an Xbox plus controllers and games out of our house. The cops stopped to observe what appears to be a robbery in progress, but then the individual actually approached the unmarked car and attempted to sell the stolen Xbox to the cops on the sidewalk in front of our house that he had just robbed. They said it was the easiest arrest they ever made. I'm keeping an especially affordable neighborhood, sir. Story 19. Not a cop, but I was the other guy. I was out ripping around on my jet ski with some friends. There was no one around, so we were darting through the shallows and between islands where we legally cannot run. Must be 100 feet from the shore to run at speed. These channels were 10 feet wide. We're having a great time when I see my buddy coming down the river on his Kawasaki. I decided to buzz right at him and do a donut to spray him with water from the jet. Right as I cut the handlebars and started to spin, I realized it wasn't my buddy. It was a PA, Game Commission officer, on a brand new jet ski that they had purchased to discreetly patrol the river. I soaked him. I got a lot of tickets that day. Story 20. Obligatory not a cop. However, on my way to work, getting off the highway, there's a left turn lane and a right turn lane. No lights and no other options. The left turn lane is where everyone wants to go and usually does move pretty fast, but still will pile up during morning rush hour. The right turn lane is very clearly marked. Yield around a smooth corner, wide painted triangle, collapsible bollards, the whole shebang. I went to turn right this morning, and this car in front of me decided to skip the 15 cars trying to go left and turn left from the right turn only lane. They sped around an unmarked black SUV, who immediately whipped on its lights, and I went to work with a huge justice renob. Story 21. I'm a cop in Ohio, and I was driving a 2011 Hyundai Elantra. The police paid for it, so it was really nice inside. Leather, extra speakers, etc. One day when I was out on patrol listening to some cop rap, a guy drove past me with speakers so loud that I could hear the song, Reba McIntyre, over the cop rap, so I blocked him with a siren and pulled him over. I walk up to the car and ask him what he's doing, and the tinted window rolled down, and it was Reba McIntyre. I was completely stunned, and I said, "I'm sorry, but a ticket is a ticket." She grinned sheepishly and said, "That's fine, you're just doing your job." It was one of the highlights of my career before I retired. Story 22. We had a new hire who went twice the limit, 160 in an 80-kilometer-an-hour zone, and then proceeded to cut off a policewoman in an unmarked car. As he was in a company vehicle with a clearly visible logo, security company, she called us and spoke to my boss. We called in the guy to the office, and I fired him. He could not believe that he was fired just for going twice the speed limit. He kept saying, "But this is the first time I've done it." Silly blockhead. About a month later, he called my boss and asked him for bail money for a DUI. My boss just laughed and hung up on him. He was worried his parents would get angry. God dang moron. Story 23. I'm on the other side of this one. I was cycling down a main road and had a green light to cross, and I was nearly run over by a massive black car that ran the light and turned into me. We both swerved to a stop. I immediately turned around and started screaming at the guy, "You idiot," etc. "You nearly killed me. Look where you're going next time." The car was unmarked by the police. The passenger side window rolled down, and there was a guy in a baseball cap and a bulletproof vest sitting there holding a rifle. I kept shouting abuse at him until I realized. He just apologized for nearly running me over and kept on driving. Story 24. I am a cop in training, but wasn't in an unmarked car. Person was playing on their phone in the middle of traffic and didn't realize what kind of car was beside them. He looks up to me, sees me, and just gives me the finger, apparently for looking at him. Only then does he notice my uniform, or perhaps the big white policier on the side of the car. My instructor didn't believe it until I assured him I wasn't making it up. That guy ended up admitting it to my instructor, probably the most expensive finger he ever gave someone, and the most expensive round of whatever they were playing on the phone. Story 25. My little brother is really good at spotting cops, marked and unmarked. One day we were on our way to a wedding when my brother tells my mom to make sure she's going the speed limit because she was about to pass an unmarked cop car. She's doubtful, but does it anyway. About 30 seconds later, a guy on a black Ducati comes flying up behind us, weaving through traffic. He squeezed between our SUV and the cop, and we all cheered when the cop flipped on his lights. My mom never questions my brother anymore. I think your brother might do some drugs. Story 26. Not an officer, but the idiot in the story. I was 17 and thought using a pigeon, fast car you follow behind in the hopes they get a speeding ticket and not you, on the highway was smart. So I followed this charger in the fast lane going well over the limit. Followed him for a good 20 minutes before he quickly went in the right lane, slowed down, and pulled behind me. Then he turned on his sirens. I was following an unmarked police car. The pigeon strategy doesn't even make any sense. If you're behind them, you're easier to pull over. Story 27. I'm a cop and nothing really changes. You'd be surprised by the stuff I see in a marked patrol car. Some people are just that oblivious, or just really don't care. Yeah, bad drivers or idiots aren't going to notice the marked Tahoe on the shoulder. The marked cruiser, the lane over, whatever. They're so self-absorbed they'll just do their thing. We had a deputy get hit when someone cut across 3 lanes, clipping his marked Crown Vic in the process because they wanted to pull in front of someone else and flip them off as a part of a road rage incident. Story 28. 2 unmarked cop cars busted me doing donuts in an empty, snowy parking lot when I was 18. They were in the far corner, and I didn't think much of it. After a few minutes of driving like an idiot, they finally flipped the lights on and drove over. They kind of laughed at me and gave me a stern talking to, but let me go. That's the right kind of policing. You weren't putting anybody in danger. Good on them. Story 29. Some guy tried suddenly coming out of a turn lane into our lane. When we didn't automatically brake to let him in, he started screaming and cursing us out, even sticking his middle finger out the window, not realizing we were cops. We lowered our window, flashed the badge, and hit the lights, and then pulled him over. The guy started crying and apologized numerous times. Story 30. I once honked at a car who changed lanes a bit too closely in front of me. The sucker was an unmarked cop car. When that silver Chevy slammed the brakes, darted behind me, and turned into a frickin' EDM show, I almost crapped myself. The officer pulled me over and apologized for cutting it close. Good for him to apologize for screwing up. Story 31. We had a guy pull into a lot next to a marked squad car and light up a joint. My buddy sitting in the car had to look around to make sure he was in fact in a squad car and that he was in fact in uniform. He was. The old adage of, we don't catch the smart ones, never rang truer. Story 32. I had a client that tried to race a blacked out Charger when they first came out in his WRX. He was winning too, at least until the trooper turned on the lights in his grill. Had managed to get to 108 miles per hour from the line. Entrapment! I wouldn't have floored it if he hadn't taken the bait. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.